Hello everybody, this is Dan from Dan's Fish, and today I want to talk to you about feeding fish, proper nutrition for fish. It's a pretty broad subject. There's a lot of debate on it. I don't claim to be the expert at all, but I've been doing this for a while, and so I'm going to tell you what works for me, what in my experience has worked well. And today's discussion is going to be tailored specifically to discus because that's what I'm keeping right now. But the things we talk about will have application to all kinds of aquarium fish, freshwater fish, maybe saltwater. I don't know much about saltwater. I've done very little with saltwater. I've kept a few, but not much. And so freshwater aquarium fish nutrition is what I'm talking about. This my beard is getting itchy. It's just long enough that it's like driving me nuts. I need to shave. I've been super busy the last couple weeks. Finally launching dansfish.com, the website, got that up and running, and so that's just been taking all my time and focus that I have available when I'm not at work. So yeah, I'll shave. Pardon the, I don't know, maybe you like it, but if not, if it's coming off, don't worry. The wife doesn't like it, so it's coming off. She gets what she wants. So anyway, fish nutrition. So I want to talk in general about a couple things about discus before I show you kind of my bag of tricks here and how I feed my discus. And by the way, lots of people do this different than I do. I'm just telling you what I do. So the first thing about discus is there have been a lot of analyses done on what discus eat in the wild. We kind of have a really good idea about what their natural diet is. And in the wild, down in South America where they come from, there's two major seasons. They're not hot and cold like they are up here in the United States. They are wet and dry. That's kind of how the seasons are defined. And in the wet period, there's plenty of food. The rivers flood up into the forest, and all the insects and all these habitats open up to all these fish because there's lots of water. It's spread all over. And so that's when they tend to breed. That's when a lot of food sources become available to them. But then in the dry season, all that kind of goes down and the water recedes, and it's still hot by all means, but so temperature isn't the big deal. I guess if you get in a small puddle in the sun, that's a big deal for you if you're a fish. But the temperature isn't swinging like it is up here in the United States. But what is happening is the water is evaporating. And so these fish get kind of confined to these smaller spaces. There's a lot more fish in these spaces, and there's a lot less food available for them all. Concentration of fish goes up, concentration of food drops, and that becomes an issue. So during these two periods, wet and dry, the discus have kind of two different kinds of diets. Now, if you'll notice on a discus, it's a rather large fish with a small mouth. Okay, it is not a predator. It's not specialized at catching organisms or anything like that. What they are really is grazers. They're detritivores. So these big, beautiful fish that often people call the king of aquarium fish, they actually eat detritus. They'll eat algae, they'll eat biofilms, they'll eat any organic material that's growing on sunken wood or tree branches or rocks or plants or whatever they can find. And they kind of just pick all day long is what they do. Now, in both the wet and dry season, a large part of their diet is detritus. Algae and all those other things we talked about, anything that they can just kind of pick at. And then they supplement that whenever they can with anything they can find. So maybe they might, maybe a freshwater crustacean might be there, like a small, I don't know what they are. I'm going to say Daphnia. It might not be Daphnia down there, but little crustaceans and things like that. And so they'll eat that. Or maybe an insect falls into the water, and so they can eat that. Or there's an insect larva that lives in the water that they find, and they'll eat that. So in both the wet and the dry seasons, they're detritivores that occasionally get to eat a more high protein item, like an insect or a crustacean or something like that. And they're constantly picking at algae as well. Now, in the wet season, they get a little more of the insects and the high protein, and they get a little more of the crustaceans and things, but they're still eating a lot of detritus, and they're still eating algae and biofilms and things like that. In the dry period, there's less availability. Insects and crustaceans and things, higher protein foods become less available, and so they have more detritus in their diet, more algae in their diet, and those kinds of things. But in each case, detritus and algae and those kinds of things are a major part of their diet. And Heiko Blair has done a lot of this analysis. A lot of other people have as well, and you can look it up. You can read the studies of the stomach contents of discus in the wild and get an idea of what this is. So keeping that in mind, a discus's natural mentality is to eat all day long. They eat frequently. Now, whenever they can, they eat high nutrition meals. Excuse me. I apologize. It's allergy season here in Sheridan, Wyoming, and so for about a month every spring, I'm on allergy medicine and I'm coughing a lot and it's unpleasant and I'm sorry, but that's how it is, you know. The pollen comes, the mold comes, and man, it just really hits me. So they want to eat all day long, and so they don't want to eat like, you know, massive meals like a dedicated predator would or something. So it helps to keep that in mind as we're trying to feed the discus. Now, another thing is in the wet season when they're breeding, there is some more protein available than usual. So discus, while they're growing, they do need a little more protein, and they do need a lot of food. We typically see them, you know, at 2 to 3 inches or so when they're offered for sale. Sometimes bigger, but often they're still growing. And so keep in mind they need to eat a lot and they need to eat frequently, or they won't reach their potential. So in the aquarium, obviously I'm not going to be feeding them, you know, detritus, and I'm not going to have a bunch of biofilm going, enough for them to survive on, or all those natural things that they have, but we can do something kind of similar. So I kind of divide feeding the discus into a couple different things. One is live and frozen foods. Personally, right now I feed mostly frozen foods because it's more convenient, and also because, you know, there's a little less chance of any kinds of parasites or undesirable contaminants in the frozen foods. There's still a small chance, but less than live food. But mostly because it's very convenient for me. So the ones I mostly feed are brine shrimp, and I really like the Hikari brand brine shrimp. I like the San Francisco Bay brand as well, but Hikari seems in on most of their frozen foods to be just consistently clean. Consistently nice food. The other thing that I feed are frozen bloodworms. And then the other thing, and this is amazing, if you haven't tried this food yet, frozen freshwater Mysis shrimp are awesome. The ones I use are from Piscine Energetics. I hear that Hikari also makes something like this. They make a saltwater Mysis, but I think they also make a freshwater Mysis. I just haven't tried it yet, but I use these guys a lot. The profile on here, the nutrition profile, is great for growth. A lot of protein, a lot of fat, really nice. Now, the reason I like frozen foods is they're not full of fillers, they're not very processed, they're basically just kind of flash frozen. And so they don't make a big mess in the aquarium. They do, though, if you don't rinse them. So the procedure I use is I thaw them out in a container of water, and then I dump the water out, leave the food in the bottom, fill that with fresh water, dump that out, fill that with fresh water, dump that out, and I might use a gallon of water to rinse. You know, it might take 10 times. before you stop seeing all the cloudiness in there. What happens is all that cloudiness and all the stuff that's in there, all the little tiny bits that the fish aren't going to eat that are just going to pollute your aquarium, you want to rinse all that out. And then at the end, I'll sometimes, for Mysis shrimp, we'll pour that through a sieve, and then put that into a container with some water to feed to the other fish. But it's important with frozen food, I believe, to rinse them. I don't ever just take a cube and stick it in my tank. That's convenient, and if it works for you, that's fine. But I don't want that waste in my tank. I don't want to put that load on my filters. I don't want to put that ammonia, the resulting ammonia in there, or anything like that. So I rinse a lot. And as soon as the water that the frozen food is kept in is clear, then I'll feed it. Now, a couple other things about frozen food. One is they're great for protein and fat. They do have nutrition in them. Brine shrimp in particular, this stuff is really good to help clean out a fish's system. It's got a lot of the shell kind of acts as fiber, dietary fiber, if you will, which is important to keeping their digestive system healthy. So I'll feed something, and then often brine shrimp, and then something, and then brine shrimp, and then something, and brine shrimp, just to make sure that they're getting cleaned out, so they don't get their digestive system doesn't get clogged, and they don't get bloated or anything like that. But frozen food is lacking in vitamins and minerals. It's got a big punch of protein, often a big punch of fat, which are important for growth, of course, and for maintenance as well. But vitamins and things like that can be a little iffy. So something I do is I feed this stuff. I feed the Repassion. The thing I like about Repassion is that all I have to do is add hot water to it, and it's done. A lot of people in Discus will make their own mixes, and that's fine. They'll make beef heart mixes, or they'll use squid or fish and shrimp and mix it with maybe some boiled spinach and things like that, and paprika and garlic and all kinds of things, and make their own fish food. And that's totally fine, you can do that. But I think for the cost of doing that, you can get Repassion. And for the time and the hassle it takes to do that, I can just buy Repassion. And another thing I like about the Repassion is it does have quite a bit of vitamins and minerals and different acids and things like that in it that the fish need in their nutrition. So it's a way to kind of supplement the frozen foods with a different food that has a lot of the things in it that the frozen foods are lacking. Now, that being said, the other thing that I really like about Repassion is it stays together really well in the aquarium. There's a lot of foods that you'll put in the aquarium and they'll kind of immediately start to dissolve. Frozen, like homemade beef heart and things, often you'll put that in the aquarium and it'll kind of dissolve, and a lot of cloudiness comes up, and a lot of tiny little bits of it that the fish are going to miss kind of go everywhere. And that makes a dirty aquarium. And I think that's one reason Discus folks have to clean their water so much. They're feeding these fish a lot because they're trying to grow them so they don't stunt them, and that creates a lot of waste, so they have to change the water a lot. That's just one reason. There's other reasons to do frequent water changes on Discus, but I find that the Repassion is really nice because it solves that problem. The other thing is it has quite a bit of veggies in it. At least this does. This is the community blend. There's all kinds of Repassion blends you can get, but the community blend has a good mix of protein, but also veggies and things in it like that. And remember, Discus are detritivores. They eat a lot of algae. They eat a lot of little plant matter. They eat a lot of things that aren't like high quality protein and packed with protein and fat like the frozen foods are. And so I think the Repassion is a nice way to kind of help supplement the diet, and that maybe is a more kind of natural mix than you get with just the frozen foods. And I can put a big chunk of Repassion in the tank and they'll eat it all day long. So remember, in the wild they're kind of picking all day long, and the Repassion allows them to do that. Now, that being, well, I'll go into kind of the problems and things with all these foods later, I guess. There are some problems with the frozen foods and ways to feed them that I'll talk about. There's also a big problem with the Repassion that you have to overcome, and I'll talk about that in a minute. So you have frozen foods, and you have things like Repassion, which is a gel food. You could make your beef heart and all that as well. Time and expense, I'm telling you, the Repassion ends up being cheaper and more convenient, I think. But, you know, some people want to have direct control over what they put in with their fish, and that's fine. But the Repassion works for me. Now, the other thing you can feed is prepared foods. Golden pearls, I think, are good. There's algae wafers that are good. Again, some veggie in the diet is great, and all those things. But what I usually tend to go with these are the Sarah Discus Granules. I kind of get them in bulk, so I'm just showing you this. But what this is Sarah Discus Granules. These are not the color granules. They also sell a granule for red, which has a lot of red color in it, and a granule for blue, which I haven't really looked into, but I'm assuming has a lot of blue color in it. I'm not sure what that would be exactly. But anyway, but the general granules are a pretty good diet, and the thing that these have in them that is lacking in the frozen foods is, again, vitamins and minerals. The granules are kind of coated with vitamins and minerals, and so that's a way to get some of that into your fish. Another thing, and I'm not feeding this currently because I don't like to feed color food to fish I'm going to sell, because I don't want the customer to get the fish and it's bright red because I fed it color food, and then the customer doesn't feed it color food, and in a couple weeks this bright red fish is faded to kind of an orangey or yellow color. You know, I don't want the customer to have that experience. So, but if I was on the fish I'm going to keep, I'll feed some Tetra Color food, and that's really for color, vitamins, and minerals. Sorry, that's going to happen a few times. Again, allergies suck. Which brings up a point. This right here, at the tip of my finger, is a dehumidifier. Really important in a fish room. If I didn't have that, this room would be full of mold, and that would knock me out. I wouldn't be able to keep fish if I didn't keep the humidity under control. Just because the mold would just kill me. My allergies would go haywire. Anyway, dehumidifiers, great things. So, now Tetra Color, the tropical granules, not a great necessarily nutrition profile, not the highest quality ingredients or anything like that, but again, coated with vitamins and minerals. So in conjunction with these other foods, a food like this, it doesn't have to be this one, but a food like this can be an important supplement, an important part of it. So I think by feeding several different kinds of foods, you can kind of help make sure that they're getting all the nutrition they need. If I just fed frozen foods, or just fed Repassion, or just fed something else, I might be missing a lot of important nutrients. So I like to mix it up. And even though some of the food I feed, like the Tetra, is perhaps not the highest quality and all that, it does add an important element. It can fill in some missing parts that other foods aren't getting. I think variety is the key. Now the main things I feed though are the frozen foods and the Repassion. Live foods are great, and I've kept them in the past, and I've raised a lot of them. At this particular time in my life, I don't have the time to maintain those cultures, but I will again, and I like doing that. And white worms, Greg Sage at Select Aquatics has a version of a white worm that can be grown at normal room temperatures, at warm temperatures. I haven't tried that yet, but I really want to try that one. But I've raised, brine shrimp and grindle worms and microworms and red wigglers and daphnia and confused flower beetles and fruit flies and all kinds of stuff over the years, and they're all, they all have their place as well. Right now I don't have the time, and I think most people don't have the time or don't want to dedicate the space to do that. So frozen, gel, and prepared foods are what I'm using. Now a couple things. There's something that I feel is missing from all these foods, and it's an important ingredient, and it's what I think is my secret weapon, and it's this stuff right here, this golden liquid. This is fulvic acid, and it's very, very prevalent in a lot of fish environments, especially in like black water environments and things like that. So the black water not only makes the environment acidic, which if it's acidic enough, you know, bacteria has trouble growing, it's a good sterilizer, things like that, but there's a lot of fulvic acid in those environments. And what fulvic acid is a chelating ingredient. So it facilitates a fish's ability to uptake vitamins and minerals, to process the vitamins and minerals that they eat. And it's missing in fish food. And so I use it. And the way I use it, the way I get this into my foods is there's two ways. One way is after I've rinsed all my frozen food and stuff, I'll drain the water, and then I'll add this to it. Just enough to cover the food. And I'll let it soak in there for a little while in the fridge. And the hope is that the frozen food absorbs some of it, and then it's fed to the fish. The other way I feed the fulvic acid is when I mix my Repassion, I'll put it directly in the Repassion. So if I'm mixing a cup of Repassion, I might put, I don't know, a quarter of a teaspoon or so, half a teaspoon of the fulvic acid in the Repassion food when I'm mixing it, and then when I feed it to the fish, they eat it that way. The reason I got turned on to fulvic acid is I was, at one point in my fish keeping career, experience, I was keeping wild type bettas and licorice gouramis. And these fish come from extremely acidic environments. And I was doing a bunch of research to figure out the best way I could keep them healthy. They're notoriously delicate just because they come from such pristine environments. They're so acidic that it's hard for bacteria to grow, and ammonia doesn't exist. Ammonia in those acidic environments is converted into, I believe it's called ammonium, which is not as toxic. And so they're very sensitive to ammonia, and they're very sensitive to bacteria, and I was trying to figure out what to do. And I came across research. The Steinhardt Aquarium has done a ton of research on fulvic acid. And then I came across some independent studies as well. And one of these studies, it's, I believe, published in a peer-reviewed journal and all that, but the one that convinced me was, I started seeing that fulvic acid is an important part of kind of these black water environments. That's how I kind of got into it. And I looked at the foods I was feeding and things, and I didn't see it in there. So anyway, that's how I kind of got turned on to it in the first place, when I was keeping wild type bettas and the licorice gouramis and things. So anyway, I started reading these studies. In one of them, they took a bunch of carp. Now granted, carp are not a blackwater fish or anything, but that's what the study used. And in one pond, they took a bunch of carp, they purposely infected them with Eromonas, which is a kind of hideous disease. And then they put them in two separate ponds. And in one pond, they fed food with fulvic acid in it, and in another they didn't. And the survival rates were drastically different. And I haven't read the study in a while, I don't have it in front of me, but they were drastically different. And the only difference between those two ponds that they could, account for was the fulvic acid in the diet of one pond and the fulvic acid that was not included in the diet of the other. And so I started researching this, and I found a source for it, and I've been using it ever since. Now, I don't honestly know if it just makes me feel better when I use it, but I've been using it ever since. I trust those studies, and it's, worked for me. I'm able to keep some really delicate fish, and I'm able to be successful with them. Something about the fulvic acid that's important is it's really, really hard to overdose, which is nice to know. So I don't have to be real careful about how much I give. I don't need to worry about it damaging their liver or their kidneys or anything like that. So it appears to be a really safe thing. I've been using it for years, and I believe in it. I use it. So just a little silver bullet that I use, something that I think is missing in a lot of other diets, and something that I don't hear talked about much, is this stuff, fulvic acid. The other thing that I do, and I don't do it a ton, but maybe once every day or every other day, is when I'm feeding the frozen food, when I put it in with the fulvic acid to kind of marinate, I will also add a little bit of a vitamin. In this case, this is like Centrum vitamins, just some kind of liquid vitamin that I can get at the local store, to help them kind of pick some of that up before I feed it to the fish. Now, vitamins, you do have to be careful. You could absolutely overdose those. So if you're not comfortable with that, I get it. That's why I feed the Repassion. That's why I feed the other foods, so that there is some vitamins and minerals in the diet. But I feed so many frozen foods that I do feel that once a day or every other day they should get a supplement. So I do that with the frozen foods. And also, when I only put a little bit in, and the frozen foods are only soaking a little bit up, and some of that's dissipated into the aquarium when it's fed, and so I haven't had a problem, and I've been doing that for a long time too. So those are kind of my kind of tips and tricks. The thing I do different is definitely the fulvic acid. I don't think other folks are doing that, but please do some research. Get online, look at the studies, and see if it might be something you want to try. And by the way, it's an important ingredient not just in blackwater fish. It's important in all kinds of fish. It's just those habitats tend to have a whole lot of it. In fact, when I first started using it, the first thing I tried to do was dose it in the water column, because in blackwater environments, it's in the water column. It's also in the food, but I tried doing that, and the thing is, it just took so much of it, and it's pretty expensive, that I couldn't sustainably do that. So when I finally did see the study of the carp that were fed the food instead of living, or fed the fulvic acid instead of living in environments awash with fulvic acid, I was like, oh good, I can just feed it and just use a little bit and save some money. But anyway, that's what I do there. Another trick that I use to get discus in particular, back to discus, to kind of graze over a long period of time, is I found that this stuff, the Mysis shrimp, it's a little big for a discus to eat. At least this size, my discus right now are in the 2 to 3 inch range, so their mouths are pretty small. So it's a bigger food. And what I used to do was chop it up really fine to make it easier for them to eat. What I found is they don't need that. Every now and then when I would chop it up and feed it to them, 1 or 2 of the shrimp wouldn't get chopped and would get in there, and I'd be worried that they wouldn't eat it. But I found that they would. They would eat it just fine. It just takes them a little while. So I stopped chopping it up. I just feed them the Mysis shrimp that's been rinsed and all that, fulvic acid added, all that. And I just feed it to them whole. And what happens is it kind of dissipates over the bottom of the aquarium. Again, I'm using bare bottom aquariums, so that's not a problem if it sits on the bottom for a bit. It's not going to get lost in the gravel or anything like that and pollute the water. So it goes over the bottom of the aquarium, and then the fish they can spend a half hour or an hour kind of gradually picking at it and breaking it down, which is more akin to what they would do in the wild as they're grazing kind of all day long. Now, why is it important that it go all over the bottom? The reason for that is because discus can be food aggressive. They are a cichlid, and yeah, they're a pretty peaceful cichlid, and we think of them as sometimes as a fish that could live with like a tetra, like a cardinal tetra, things like that, but they're still a cichlid, and there's a pecking order they establish within their ranks. And what happens is, if all the food is in one section of the tank, then one fish, the dominant fish, will kind of claim that food as his own or her own, and chase all the other fish away. So if the food is concentrated, a lot of the fish in the tank are likely to not get enough to eat. So one nice thing about frozen foods is when you put them in, they kind of go all over the aquarium bottom, and then fish can go all over and eat, and nobody can control it all. Which brings me to the Repassion food. I told you there was a problem with the Repassion, and what that is what I'm talking about. The Repassion, if you put in one big chunk, it's going to sit in one spot in the aquarium, and that is going to make it so that one fish is likely to control that piece of Repassion food, and that fish will get nice and fat. Maybe a couple others that are strong enough to sneak in and grab enough while he's chasing someone else away. But for the most part, a lot of the fish are not going to get equal amounts of food. And so you got to keep that in mind when you're feeding the Repassion, or any food that would sit in one spot, beef heart, Repassion, all those kinds of things. So to solve that, there's a couple tricks. One is you can feed the Repassion at the same time as you feed some of the frozen foods like brine shrimp and bloodworms. I wouldn't do it with the Mysis because the Mysis lasts a long time, but with those other foods, the brine shrimp and the bloodworms will go all over the aquarium floor, and the Repassion will sit where it sits, but the fish are all distracted by all the other foods, so they can also eat the Repassion. But the other thing that I do, and usually do in conjunction with that method, is I'll take the Repassion, instead of just one piece, I'll cut it up into lots of little pieces, little squares, and I'll kind of put those all over the bottom of the aquarium. And so now that's spread out and the fish can eat at that, whether they're dominant or subdominant. Well, sorry for the weird camera jump there. I just went to upload the video on Discus Nutrition to YouTube, and realized that the last the last tiny bit of the video had cut out, and I didn't want to leave it awkward like that. So I'm just filming this quick little goodbye to end the video. I was just about done anyway. So anyway, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions about the material in the video, please leave a comment below, and I will answer any questions you might have. And if you haven't checked out the new website, dansfish.com, I'm pretty excited about it. So if you got a minute, please go check it out. And if you haven't subscribed to this channel or liked the Facebook page, I invite you to check those out and consider doing that if you want to. Anyway, thanks for watching. I hope it's been helpful, and yeah, I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.